Well, I'm up here on the food plot on top of the hill. I cleared this out by hand probably like 5 or 6 years ago now. First couple of years I had brassicas in here. They did okay. Then I had soybeans for like a year or two in here, and I had one good year of soybeans in here. And then ever since then I haven't been able to grow them because deer have been browsing them down too bad, and we've had some drier years recently. So I figured this is a perfect spot to, convert this into like a clover perennial plot where I don't have to like work this ground up every year, just kind of take another spot off my hands for just, we got so many other acres that we can provide these deer winter food. They don't need this little quarter-acre plot right here into like brassicas or something for later in the season. So this is a perfect spot for clover. And once this gets established, I'll just have to mow it once or twice a year and the weeds should stay out of here. I should have took some more footage of planting this area, but the day I planted it was one of the few dry days we had within that whole 1 to 2 week stretch. I planted this clover plot and 2 other clover plots I'll show you. This was like half no-till, half tillage. Basically, it was winter. It was, I think I had soybeans in here last year, and the weeds just took over. The deer browsed them down so bad they never even got going. So I seeded the winter rye in here in September. It wasn't really any soybeans that made it, maybe a few pods, but anyways, I put in the winter rye real thick last September, as you can see here. And I always just seem to get, I probably didn't need to come in here with the disc. I could have probably just, I didn't know how much rain we were going to get, because in the past I haven't had the greatest luck. Because like last year I did this in a spot where I just no-tilled the clover, crushed it down, and took the clover forever to germinate because we didn't get any rain for like practically all of June. This year it would have been fine, but I came in here with the disc and lightly disced up everything, as you can see, about 50% disced up. We got some really heavy rain. We didn't look like we got too much runoff here, which is good, or erosion. You can see all the weeds coming up. I didn't put any pre-emerge down, but so this clover is going to be battling these weeds. I'll probably have to mow it once this year, probably later in the summer, August or early September. I don't want this clover to get choked out by the weeds the first year, but by next year this time, this stuff should be practically knee-high in here. And I mixed in about probably a 1/3 alfalfa with I got like red clover and white clover and alfalfa in here. So basically you can clearly see this is clover, and these are all weeds coming up, all these little broadleafs. Probably a lot of lamb's quarters in here. The last couple of years this has been pretty weedy, like I said. Yeah, that's lamb's quarters right there. Yeah, there's a ton of weeds in here. But the good thing is there's a ton of clover and alfalfa. I seeded this really thick. All 3 of these little spots I'll show you tonight, I seeded really thick. Like I said, unfortunately, I didn't get any video of planting any of this stuff. I just was kind of hard-pressed for time to set up the tripod and just get some seeding and cultipacking. So this will just be a results video. You'll see. I'll probably have another 1 or 2 updates. I might even stretch this out all the way through the end of the year before I upload this video. We'll see. But yeah, it's looking good. So here's plot number 2. This was clover for probably roughly 3 years. And then I had 2 years of brassicas, which was the last 2 years. And now I'm putting it back into clover. I tried putting in clover last year with the brassicas, but I think I seeded in too many brassicas where they might have outcompeted the tiny little clover plants last August when I planted this, and I didn't really see hardly any clover coming back this spring. I could have overseeded, did some frost seeding in the spring, but I figured I'll just spray it all. I sprayed it all off. You can see I had some rye in here too. I sprayed it all off and worked it up. So basically this plot and the next plot, the 3rd plot, were completely sprayed off and worked up, seeded, and then cultipacked. The first one over there on the hill is higher ground, and I've had a little bit of erosion runoff because it's on a slope right there. So my plan was to no-till, but I ended up doing, like I said, about 50% tillage on that plot. You can see right here, and this is like in a swamp right here. It's really dark ground. We got a ton of broadleaf. That's not all clover. That's about half clover, half broadleaf weeds. All this pigweed and probably some lamb's quarters in here too. Here's some clover, 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 clover. I think I just heard a deer take off running. Anyways, as you can see, these plots are gonna definitely need some mowing. At least once, this stretch right here, maybe twice. You don't want these weeds to outcompete and shade out the clover. Here's some water hemp on the edge right here. But that's what probably a lot of this is in here. And you can see how thick it is over there too. Just nasty. But once this clover gets established, it should choke out most of these annual broadleafs. Almost, see this right here, there was a buckthorn right here. I cut this down earlier this year, killed the stump. This had previously been just kind of like shaded dirt because it was a buckthorn about that big. I'm leaving that one for my scrape tree, but there was one right here about that big shading the ground as a circle around here. And I never really tilled or planted anything right here because it was just shaded. We're like, that has tons of weeds. Right here underneath this buckthorn, I'm not seeing any weeds coming up. I mean, there's a couple right here, but that's stuff that was there already. I'm not seeing any annual broadleafs coming up. This is, well, right here's one. This is primarily all clover you see right here. That's how thick I put this. I probably really overseeded the clover in here, but you can't really overseed it. It just depends on how much you want to spend. I mean, these are small plots, so I put the seed in really thick, hoping to get as best of a start as I can. That way I probably won't even need to frost seed anything next year. I didn't put any alfalfa in this spot or the third spot because these are wetter ground areas, as you can tell. This is just a mix of about 50. Actually, this plot I think I put about 75% white clover in this plot because this is some pretty big trees right here. And obviously all these trees have real big roots sucking all the moisture. Whatever I plant right here never does hardly much of anything other than the clover I had here years ago. And that was primarily white clover too. The red clover needs a little bit more sunlight. The white clover can handle a little bit more shade. So I put in about 75% white clover here, 25% red clover. The next plot is way over that end of the property. I'll take you there next. Same black dirt. You'll see in a second here. So this right here is the third planting. You can see same scenario, really thick, looks really good. Most of that's clover, but some of that's weeds. You can see it's kind of in like little lines. That's from the cultipacker, kind of just funneling the seed into like little mini rows. This is all just obviously broadcasted, but this is some pretty dark, loose ground. So I obviously cultipacted before I seeded, and then I cultipacked again. Otherwise, I was afraid I was going to I was just going to bury these seeds too deep. There's actually surprisingly a lot of grass coming in here. Some ragweed right here. But this is all clover. And this plot, I did pretty much closer to 50-50 on the white clover, red clover. Got a little water hole right here. It's drying up, surprisingly, considering how much rain we've had. Doesn't help that it's in the sun. This is basically peat ground right here, like black peat ground. We had a big brush pile here and it burnt a hole in the ground. That's why we just threw this tarp in here, and I didn't dig that. So that's just ends up being where it was. They use it a little bit. I don't think they like walking on this. I should come in here and just cover the whole perimeter of this thing with like wood chips or something. I'll probably do that once this clover gets established. I don't want to cover up all this stuff on the edge right here. So like maybe next spring or something, I'll just bring a bunch of wood chips and just cover up this tarp as best I can. It's whatever. But yeah, it's looking pretty good. Most of this plot actually looks pretty weed free. Now that I look at it, like pretty much 90% of what you see right here, probably 70, there's a lot of weeds coming on actually. But like I said, basically all these plots will just probably need one mowing late August, early September, to just chop off all the broadleaf annual weeds, and then the clover can really bounce back faster than those annual broadleaves. And then obviously next spring it'll really take off. Now that I got, you know, last year was super dry. We weren't getting any rains at all. I've had the best luck planting clover, like as a spring planting, like when you would plant corn or soybeans. I have not had the greatest luck planting clover in the fall. And then it just doesn't seem like it, not all of them survive the winter frosts or whatever, these little plants. But yeah, this is looking really good. Well, out here doing what could be the last update of these 3 little clover plots. I sprayed all 3 of them with clethodim. I think it was, man, the mosquitoes are bad out here. That's why I'm moving around so much. I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks, no, probably at least 3 weeks ago now. And I'm so glad I did that. Man, it really saved these plots, especially this one. So you can see all this foxtail, basically. That's what the main grass that was coming in real thick in this plot. That clethodim turns the grass like reddish as it's dying off, and it takes longer to, it takes, you know, a couple weeks to kill. It's not as fast of a kill as like 2,4-D or glyphosate. So it takes a couple weeks for this stuff to completely die. You can see some of this is still kind of got green leaves. It might somewhat survive. And there is broadleafs in here, but I'm probably gonna, I might mow it once this year. The other 2 I have mowed a little bit because they're wetter ground, blacker ground, tons of water hemp and other broadleafs coming in. But this plot was mainly grass. You can see this grass was way up above this clover, and now the grass is dying down and the clover is really popping. And I do have alfalfa mixed in on this plot. That's what this is. A little bit more right here. Alfalfa right there. And you can see as we go up the hill here, there was even more grass, and the clover was even smaller here because it just keeps getting drier and the higher you go up the hill. Alfalfa right here, and all amongst this dying grass is clover. You can see how small some of this stuff is. As long as it's there and growing, next year it should really pop. And I should only have to mow this once, maybe twice next year, this being such a dry, high ground plot, depending on how wet the year is. And you can see there is clover nipped off in here, so there's got to be deer, you know, using this. Not seeing a ton of browse, but it is pretty small yet. But I'm pretty happy with how this is looking. I mean, it could look better, but it doesn't look terrible either. I mean, that clethodim really saved this plot. Otherwise, I mean, we'd be dealing with waist high grass in the majority of this plot. But you can see how much smaller the clover is up on the top of this hill here. But it's here, and next year it should be definitely more established. And I can always hit this again next year with clethodim if the grass is start to come in bad again. But then you get down to about the middle here, and it's looking like a pretty good clover plot. Pretty solid clover. Seems like the clover's coming in thicker and faster than the alfalfa. I'm not sure how much alfalfa I seeded in here. It was at least a third alfalfa or close to a half, and I'm not seeing a ton of it. Like right here's some. Right here's some more. So I guess it's in here when you start to look, but it just looks like a lot of clover. Alfalfa right here. More alfalfa right here. And then this side over here by the woods came in even faster because it was getting a little bit more shade, and it wasn't, you know, it's not quite as dry here. This side, I don't think I put any alfalfa on just because it's shadier. I might have. Let's look around in here. I can't remember. I'm not really seeing any, but this side had quite a bit less grass too. Just a little bit grass out here in the full sun. And in the shade right here, there was very little grass, some stinging nettles right here. The deer actually, well, this is water hemp they're eating on here, but I think I put more white clover on this side because the white clover does better in the shade and the red clover does better in, well, red clover and white clover both do good in sun, but the white clover does better in the shade than the red clover. The red clover can get knee high. I put a lot of that out there. All right, I'm gonna head down to the other spot at the bottom of the hill, and then I'll take you to the swamp plot, or to the waterhole plot. All right, so here's the other clover plot. This one had little to no grasses. I think I did spray it with clethodim because there was a scattered one here or there. And this one I mowed that half and right here. I couldn't get into the back half because it was pretty wet right there the day I was mowing. So this has all been mowed at least once, and it looks taller and thicker than the first plot I showed you up there on the hill on that really dry site. And you can see there is quite a bit of browse in here, way more than the last plot. And I think this plot was, I think I put a heavier mix of white clovers in this one. I can't remember. You can see some of these are already flowering. But I did put, there should be some red clover in here too. There's a ton of stinging nettles coming up on this side. Oh, that reminds me. I did put a pretty heavy mix of white clover because there's all these big trees here. This side never does that good. The white clover does a little bit better in the shade than the red clover does, just simply because it doesn't get as tall. And so this right here is where the wetter section was. You could see there had to been some standing water and killed off the clover coming up right here. It's been so wet this year. But this whole plot's just coming in real nice and thick, choking out pretty much everything. In the future, all I'm gonna have to do is pretty much mow this at least once, maybe 2 times a year, just to keep a lot of these broadleafs down. And next year, this stuff should come in even thicker and should be really thick like this. You know, by the time all this water hemp is even trying to germinate, this stuff usually doesn't start popping up until like late May, early June. And by that point next year, this clover is going to be this thick, if not thicker. So there should be little to no broadleafs in here next year, and just mow it once or twice when I can get in here when it's not really wet without rutting everything up. I should have a nice thick clover plot here for years to come. There's always been some bad patches of canary grass down in here in the past. I don't see any of that coming up. I put this clover in super thick, like probably 3 times the recommended rate. I mean, you cannot really overseed clover. So the thicker the better, especially when you're doing no cover crop. I don't like doing oats or, I mean, my cover crop is the weeds. I get plenty of volunteer weeds that come in. So I'm just seeding in the clover as thick as I can to get a good stand, because I don't want to have to replant next year. This should be a good stand for a couple years at least, hopefully 5+. So I'm going to take you over to the third little spot. That one's probably looking the worst. I did mow that one and it was kind of wet, and I rutted it up a little bit, stunted some of the clover. That one had a little bit more grasses coming in, so I sprayed that one good with clethodim too. Like I said, this one had very little grasses, if any, coming in. I can't even remember if I sprayed it or not. I don't think so. I'll take you over to the third spot here in a second. All right, so this is the third and final spot. Like I said, this is probably the spot that's looking the worst, but they're all looking pretty good. There's just a lot of broadleafs in this plot, and I did kind of rut it up a little bit. Like right here is when I drove through with the tractor. It kind of really ripped up the first like an inch to inch and a half of soil, and kind of set back a lot of this clover, but it's in here still. I did mow this whole plot, but these broadleafs are coming back pretty aggressively, and there was some scattered grasses There's one that's dying. And there was some more in here. Wow, this is just a broadleaf that got ran over. It didn't really get mowed off. I'm not seeing, right here, some grasses. There really wasn't a ton of grass in this plot. Some more over here. It's mainly just broadleafs, like I said. And you can clearly see where I drove through here and ripped it up a little bit, but probably won't mow this again unless it dries up real good. Be nice to mow down a lot of these broadleafs before they seed out this fall. But like I said, next spring, all these plots should just take off and really start growing aggressively in the spring, way before a lot of these annual broadleafs. See right here, there's hardly any clover coming in. It's really struggling. Just tons of weeds. A little bit of clover here and there. And right here, it's got really ripped up going in and out. But the clover's still in here, so that's why it'll have to get real dry. Or maybe I'll just have to come in here by hand and just weed whack or hack off some of these taller broadleafs. Along the woods here, it looks the best. Actually, now that I think of it, I did skip this one pass right here because it's kind of shady. The broadleafs didn't come in as bad here. I think I skipped mowing right here because there really wasn't many tall weeds in here. Maybe that's another reason why it still looks a little better here. I probably shouldn't have mowed, but this is probably the plot with the least browse that I'm seeing too. A little bit here and there. This is just a tiny little spot. I mean, we're talking 30 by 15 yards probably. And then I got brassicas going that way. Well, hope you enjoyed this short little, well, it probably wasn't a short video, but I haven't uploaded a clover food plot video in a while, and I don't like doing cover crops with clover because I get so many, like I said, I get so many volunteer weeds as it is. That kind of acts as my cover crop, and I got small clover plots. It's not like I'm doing an acre of clover, so I can afford to, you know, really crank on the seed here and really get the clover coming in thick. But yeah, maybe I'll have an update of these plots next year. I doubt it, but I would assume that all three of these plots are going to look better next year, second year. So yeah, thanks for watching.